and welcome to Unleashed, Rise Up and Roar. I am your host, and my name is Mandy Leigh, and I'm here with my co-host, Sophia Van Brunt, and we are so excited to be here with you this Saturday. This is such an exciting show, and we are so glad that you decided to tune in and spend your Saturday afternoon with us. And we just welcome you, and this is going to be such a powerful episode. And today I'm actually going to be sharing a bit about my story, so you're going to get to hear firsthand some of the things that the Lord has brought me through. And this show is all about people that have been through some intense traumas. And not only have they been through intense trauma, but they've also overcome these traumas. And we like to share stories of survivors of deep trauma, that unspeakable trauma, the things that we don't get to talk about on a daily basis, the things that we don't really share day to day, or the things that you're even afraid to bring up, like in church or other social circles. And we want to get into those deep dark places, and we want to shine a light into those spaces and into those places. And we want you to know that if you've been through some deep dark trauma, you are not alone. And we want to share stories of other men and women that have been through similar things, or even worse things, and let you know that there is hope and that there is help. And you do not have to wander in a dark night all by yourself. And we want to shine the light of truth into the dark places of trauma, and let you know that through the power and grace of Jesus Christ, you too can overcome. And our theme verse is Revelation 12:11, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And we want to let you know that when you come under the blood of Jesus and you allow his grace to cover you, and then you also share your story with the world, and use the power of your testimony, there is so much healing and so much freedom in that combination. And that's what we want to do here on this show, is we want to provide a platform for other people to break free from the deep dark traumas that have kept them bound and kept them from held them back from being who God called and created them to be. We all have a divine destiny. We have a story that we've been through here in this earth, but there is another narrative, right? There's the narrative that God says about us. We are not what happened to us, right? We are who God says that we are. And we want everyone to understand that you are not what happened to you. You can align with who God says that you are, and you can operate from that narrative. And by sharing your story and sharing your testimony, it breaks the power of shame. It breaks the power of judgment. It breaks the power of condemnation. And it actually brings you into the light and life that you were designed to have in Jesus Christ. And that's what we want to really empower you with here on this show. I want to talk about my story today. And I know Sophia, she's going to kind of take the reins, and she's going to ask me, some questions, just like I asked her last week. So Sophia, welcome. Thank you for being here as my co-host. Is there anything that you want to share with our viewers today?
Yeah, thank you so much I'm so glad to be here too. And I just there's just such a powerful message in your testimony. And I'm just going to say it again, like I said last week, in because I just had a chance to share a piece of my testimony today. And there's just so much power behind what God can do, how God showed up when was when you're broken, and he mends the pieces. That's what we were talking about today, is he mends the pieces.
So good.
And so many times people just don't understand that. And your voice can be the God can really use your if you as you're surrendering to him, God can really use you to share something very powerful to someone else, and it would help them through what they're going through. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, that's so, so true. Our voice, our story is someone else's survival guide, right? We say that all
Mhm.
the time. And, we have a coaching program that we run called Survivor on Fire. And if you are a survivor of deep, dark trauma, we invite you to actually find us on Facebook. Our Facebook group is called Survivor on Fire. And we want to help you ignite your life and set your story on fire and be a burning light in
Yeah.
the darkness for someone else. And Sophia is so right. Our voice is like a beacon of hope for other people that are going through the same thing. There's so much power in our voice and in our language. Okay.
Yes.
And, I will never forget. It was back in 2020, and I was everybody was like sitting there every day watching the news. Remember, like, is the
Yeah.
world going to shut down? Is the world going to end? Like, what's going on here? We were all just kind
Yeah.
of on the edge of our seats all the time, like
Mhm.
watching the news every single day. Like, oh my goodness, like what is actually happening? And we were all just waiting with bated breath and
Yeah.
hanging on the news every single day. And you know, it was during that time that something started coming up in the news and started becoming like mainstream media content. And that was the
Mhm.
topic of sex trafficking. And I don't know about any of you, but that was the first time that I remembered seeing that kind of stuff really all the time in mainstream media. And
Mhm.
um a lot of things started popping up around that time, like awareness meetings in different ministries. They started happening over and over and over again, like everywhere. And
Mhm.
it just started
Yeah.
becoming really prominent. And so I actually went to one of those awareness meetings in 2020. And I remember sitting there in that awareness meeting, and this woman, she started talking about what sex trafficking actually is. And as she started to share what sex trafficking is, it was like these lights just came on for me. And all of the sudden, I realized that something that I had been through when I was a teenager, a deep, dark trauma that I had buried for years out of shame and judgment and condemnation, I had buried it into the deep recesses of my soul. But as this woman in this awareness meeting was talking that day, I finally got language to wrap around that deep, dark part of my history. And I realized for the first time in my entire life that I had actually been trafficked when I was 16. I didn't know that before. But because of the power that language gave me, I realized, wow, that's what actually happened to me.
Mhm.
And she started using terms like commercial sex industry. I had never heard that phrase before, but from the time I was 18 until I was 29 years old, that's the industry that I was trapped inside of. But I never ever talked about it. Because at the age of 29, I came back to Jesus, and I was in a church, and I was talking to the pastor, and he shamed me and silenced me right then and there in his office that day. And he was like, "We don't use those words in church, and we don't need to talk about that kind of stuff." So I never did. I never talked about it. I never ever wanted to say those words out loud again, because when you say the words like prostitution and stripping and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
there's so much shame wrapped up in that. And
Mhm.
mainstream Christianity, they're afraid of that kind of stuff, right? So they want you to be silenced. They don't want you to say it. But when I was in that awareness meeting in 2020, and this woman was talking about commercial sex, and she was using that phrase, the commercial sex industry, that gave me that language to wrap around what I had been through. And I finally had the courage to start speaking out about what I had been through and what Jesus had rescued me out of, right? And it was such a powerful time for me. For the first time, I was able to actually talk about what I had been through. And there's so much power in language. And here at Survivor on Fire, we want to empower everyone with the gift of language to wrap
Yeah.
around those deep, dark parts of your history, right? We want
Yeah.
to give you the strength to be able to stand up and talk about what had happened to you, because we've all
Mm.
been through being silenced, right, Sophia? I'm sure that you've
Yeah.
been through being silenced as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I like what you had to say about awareness. Just first of all, just the awareness that happened and how that's actually the first step, right?
Yes.
But also what you were saying with shame and how when we're afraid to share our story, we're afraid to share something that has happened to us because we've been silenced by the church or we've been silenced by family. As I shared last week, it was the secret. It's like the secret that you're not supposed to tell. And God, when we bring it into the light, God makes it new. God clears all of the shame. He clears all of the fear, and because there's freedom in knowing that you're forgiven for that dark thing. For whatever it is, cuz I could go through all kinds of examples here, but there's just so much freedom on the other side of that. When we bring it to the light and ex- come to God on it, and he just says, you're forgiven, it's okay. What you've gone through was a horrible thing, but I'm here, I was there the whole time, and I have brought you through it, and you're forgiven, and there's freedom in that. But we have to first make that step, and if we're shamed and silenced, we're not gonna live in freedom.
Yeah, it's so true. And Sophia brought up too about a lot of times shame does come through the church, right? But then a lot of times it does come through our family of origin as well.
Yeah.
And I actually went through that. The first time that I stepped out and shared my story in a public way, I gave my full disclosure testimony back in the beginning of 2022, and it aired on March the 2nd, which was incidentally the first airing of this of this TV show too. So anyway, I believe that this was like full redemption for me, right? Because the
Yes,
first time that I
amen.
stepped out and shared, it caused so many problems for me because I did not know how to share my story in a constructive way. So I shared all wrong, and I didn't have the coaching and training that I needed to share my story in a constructive way. So I actually went about it, in a wrong way,
Yeah.
and it caused a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil within my family of origin, right? But
Yeah.
it was a catalyst. So I'm actually glad that I went through that, because I went through, you know, a lot of pain and turmoil so that my future clients wouldn't have to, right? So I
Yeah.
shared my story the wrong way the first time, and I learned some very hard and valuable lessons along the
Yeah.
way. But that actually became a catalyst for me to create a program to
Yeah.
teach people how to share their story the right way. Okay,
Yeah.
so we actually coach people on how to share their story in a constructive way rather than a destructive way, because we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to villainize people. We don't want to victimize people. We don't want to throw people under the bus. And, I did it all wrong the first time. And that was something that the Lord used, though, in a powerful way so that I could guide others
Yeah.
on the journey of how to share their story in a right way. And if you are somebody that has been silenced and you are ready to share your story with the world and you want to get it out into the open, you want to get it out into the light, but you don't know how to do that, we want to help you. Okay, I
Mhm.
actually went through all the pain and all the heartache and all the turmoil so that you don't have to. Okay. So reach out to us. You can email us at yourstoryonfire@gmail.com. And we would be happy to come alongside of you and help you learn how to share your story in a constructive way so that your story can be someone else's survival guide, right? And my story is something that has been a work in progress for many, many, many years. Okay. And the Lord finally in 2020, when I went to that awareness meeting, I will never forget it. I was sitting there and then they played a worship song at the end. And I literally felt this powerful anointing just flow over me from the top of my head to the soles of my feet. My whole body got literally set on fire. I felt like I was on fire. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God was telling me it was time for me to come out of hiding and to start sharing my story openly about what I had been through. Okay. And while the
Yeah.
first time that I stepped out and shared my story, I did it all wrong, it's okay because God used it all, you know. But now I'm sharing my story and I'm empowering other women and men that have been through similar journeys, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving them language to wrap around their stories. In fact, we just came out with a book in November of 2023. That book is also called Unleashed, Rise Up and Roar. And Sophia, if you have that book, yeah, show
Yeah.
it. That's it. That's the book. And my chapter is the first chapter in this book. And I share all about my story of how I was trafficked when I was 16, and also my story of overcoming that and how Jesus pulled me through that. And you know, when somebody that there's a girl, she picked up our book, she read our book, and she reached out to me and she said, "Thank you so much for sharing that." She said, "I never realized that I was trafficked until I read your story." And because I was given the language to wrap around what I had been through in 2020 through that awareness meeting, and now I'm able to write about it and speak about it. Now I'm empowering other people that have also been through similar things to know that that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened to them too.
Yeah.
Trafficking is an epidemic that is happening all over the globe, and it needs to stop. It really needs to stop.
Yeah.
And it is not going to stop until we shine a light into this dark atrocity, until
Mm-hmm.
we raise awareness. Like Sophia said,
Yeah.
awareness is the first step. We need to raise awareness to what's actually happening. And you know
Yeah.
what? I'm telling you, we don't even realize that we're partnering with trafficking and that we're actually supporting trafficking.
Yeah.
And so my story in our book actually shines a light into how we as even Christians are supporting trafficking. And I
Yeah.
know, Sophia, this is something that, you know, you have a heart for as well, is really putting a stop to this. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
this is something that is near and dear to your heart as well. And I know you read my story. So what was your take on it?
Yeah. I think just being aware how easy it is and not realize that that's what you were caught up in.
Yeah.
And just realizing what really happens in those places.
Yeah.
And it was really scary. It was really scary for me to know that I could have gotten put into a space like that, and just how easy it is for those spaces to happen all over the world. And as we are more aware now, how often it's happening and how it's happening to young children. I
Yes.
never even thought about even sleepovers, and
Yes.
realizing when your kids were sleeping over at someone else's house, like, who goes to their house?
Yes.
Because so many times I've heard, even through women being molested, or even just what you would call rape or date raped, because somebody was in a house that they slept over at. And I never even thought about that. So raising that awareness, being a whole lot more careful about who our kids are around was a huge, huge wake up call for me.
Absolutely. And it's so true. Statistically, most people that are trafficked by someone that they know, like a friend or a family member. And that's what
Yeah.
happened to me. This group of women, I was actually trafficked by a group of women. And
Hmm.
traffickers are not always men. We want to
Right.
stigmatize sometimes, but my traffickers when I was 16 were women. And it was this group of women that befriended me. And, I was in a really vulnerable place in my life. I had actually like ran away from home, basically, is what happened. And I was, without friends, without family around me. And I just wanted to be loved and accepted. And so when these women befriended me, I thought that I was the luckiest person in the world, right? And they groomed
Yeah.
me over a course of a couple of weeks. It was like, I don't know, probably 3, 4 weeks where they were taking me through this grooming process where they were like acting like they loved me, and they would take me shopping, they would take me
Right.
to get my hair done, I mean, to these
Yeah.
high end salons, and they would dress me up like a Barbie doll, and they would take me out dancing to these clubs. And I mean, I was getting into clubs, I was 16 years old, getting into clubs where I shouldn't have been in these clubs, first of
Yeah.
all. And little did I know that the nightmare that was awaiting me at the end of all of that, and it was just very traumatic how it all actually transpired. And if you want to hear or read the whole story, you can pick up our book, but I
Mm.
tell the story in depth about how they actually ended up taking me to what they called a party, but it was not a fun kind of party. This was a different kind of party. And I ended up going into this room in the back, in the back of this trafficking house. And that's where, they would send these men back there. And, you could just imagine, but I do share what happens in detail in the book. But
Yeah.
our little girls are getting trafficked. I was 16
Hmm.
years old, and I'm sure that my parents, thought that I was safe. We were in good schools, good neighborhoods, whatever. But this was happening right under everyone's noses. No one knew that I was being trafficked, right? Because
Right.
I was captain of the cheerleading squad. I went to a private Christian school, but then I ran away from my dad's house due to some family issues at home. And, I went to go live with my biological mother. And I was kind of in this space where there weren't a whole lot of rules for me to follow, and I just had a lot of freedom. Not that I would have followed the rules anyway. The name of my
Right.
chapter is called In Plain Sight, because
Hmm.
yes, there is kidnapping of little children. They're being chained up and caged up in foreign countries, and that is going on. But there's another type of trafficking that's happening right here in the land of the free and the land of the brave, in
Yeah.
America, on our soil, in our backyards, right under our noses. And that's what
Yes.
my story actually shines a light on, and I see young girls, they're all over TikTok and Facebook and everywhere else, and they've got these like skimpy outfits on, and they think nothing of it. Well, you know what, girls, I just want to tell you right now, do not put yourself in harm's way like that. Don't make yourself an easy target and prey, and for predators, because they're out there, they're scouring the internet looking for you.
Hmm.
And before you know it, you will find yourself in a place that is so dark that you will never be able to get out of. And I got stuck in that industry for 13 years. And I don't
Yeah.
want that to happen to you. So keep, just have respect for yourself, for your body,
Hmm.
and don't put yourself in those positions.
You have something that is really, really key, and that was that you were running away, and there was probably loneliness. There was probably like you didn't know who you were. There was probably some identity things that were happening for yourself. And
Yes.
so these group of women gave you the love that you were looking for, or at least artificially, it wasn't, there wasn't for fulfillment with it. And I think that that is something that needs to be shed a light on in this day and age, is because we are, what's going on in the world now is because our kids, our children are growing up in families that where the parents maybe aren't aware of the fact that something's going on with their child. And then when they do finally get, whatever the love or some sort of acceptance maybe they didn't get in their family, then they're seeking it other places, which is very key to what you have to share in your story. That's a very big point
Yes,
of
it
where
is.
we need to, where we it's God is the source. God's the source, and God is the one that ultimately filled up your life, in
Yes.
the end. And it's so important for that. In if we can make awareness around that in other families and teach other families how we can speak with our kids and really show them that we, show them the love and introduce them to a loving God, then raising awareness around that is very, very, very key.
Yes, absolutely. It was a lot of just lack of love that I was feeling, and those identity issues. Absolutely. That is what led me to seek attention and love in those false places, those empty places. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And
Yeah.
just like my identity was under attack when I was a teenager, it took me, I'm now 47 years old. It took me 30 years to come to this place of
Mhm.
understanding who I am in Jesus. But I just want to encourage you to discover who you are in Jesus now. Don't let
Yeah.
30 years pass you by before you reach out to the one, the only one who can fulfill you. If you are struggling with your identity and you don't know who you are in Christ, we also want to invite you. We're having a conference in April of 2024 in Little Rock, Arkansas. If you are in Arkansas or in Texas or Oklahoma or Tennessee or Louisiana or Mississippi or Missouri or any other neighboring state, we do invite you to come in person. And this conference is free to attend. And if you can't attend in person, we also are going to have a live streaming option. So you can sign up and register to attend our conference at www.riseupandroar2024.com. We thank you for joining us today for another episode of Unleashed, Rise Up and Roar, and we will see you again next week. Have a great week. Bye now.